What's up again, everybody? Tournament season for Dice Masters is now in full swing, and looking at the teams that are really making the meta what it is, we're basically looking at the same sort of teams that we've seen in the past. Lantern Ring teams are still very strong. Beholder has had an uptick this year, so we've seen some of that in some tournaments lately. And of course, we've seen Bard teams as well, some Bard teams that are running Imprisoned as well as Bard, and some that are just straight Bard. And while those cards are powerful and have their place on the team as the highlight, as the focal point, another type of card is popped up on just about every competitive team out there, and that's the card text wiping tool. Whether it be an action die or a character that wipes card text wiping tools are super important in the entirety of competitive Dice Masters. So in this video, we're going to talk about 3 action cards that go on your team that help you wipe card text. And we're also going to talk about 2 character cards that go on your team and help you wipe card text. We're going to talk about what the benefits of each are, what they do specifically, and what they do different from the others. Alright, so starting with our action cards, we have Kryptonite, Green Death, we have Prismatic Spray, Lesser Spell, one of my personal favorite cards in the game, and we have Captain Cold's Cold Gun, the newest card text wiping tool from the Green Arrow and the Flash set. Taking a look at Common Kryptonite from the World's Finest set, it is a 2-cost bolt action that goes onto your team. It's not a basic action, and the card text says that you can ignore the text on target character dice character card for each of its dice and global abilities. Its burst face doesn't really matter for what we're talking about here. It says also Superman-affiliated character dice can't block, but the most important part is what we just read, that very first part that says ignore the text on target character dice character card. So important things to note with Kryptonite with regards to how to use it and what it does. First things first, when you apply it to a target character, it wipes the text from a single card, and all the dice from that card lose their abilities. It removes global abilities from the card, and very important here is the last point. The enemy die that you want to card text wipe has to be on the field, has to be active in order for you to apply this to that card. So you can't just say this targets something that's not out like you can with other cards that we're going to talk about later. This has to be something that's out on the board, and then you apply this to it. So here's an example of what it looks like to use Kryptonite. Let's say my opponent has half-elf bard out on the field, or let's even say he has 3 half-elf bards out on the field, and you have just now, on your turn, rolled Kryptonite. So let's pretend that you're using Kryptonite, and I'll represent that by turning it on its side, this card here. Please don't sue me, Magic the Gathering. I know that's tapping, but don't sue me. So you use Kryptonite's ability to blank one of the half-elf bard's card text, and because Kryptonite has the ability to wipe card text for every die out, it'll wipe the other card text off of those other 2 dice as well. So it's essentially removing the card text itself, the card, not just one of the die's attributes. Now, an important thing to note with Kryptonite and with a couple of the other cards that we're going to look at here in a second is that Kryptonite can only be used on your turn because it is an action die that does not have continuous attached to it. So with regards to cards like Bard that have a win attacks ability that make them so powerful, it's not going to do much for you because the opponent needs to use that on his turn in order to get that buff, and this only lasts until the end of the turn, as do all action dice unless they specify otherwise. And I think it's because of the fact that you can only use Kryptonite on your turn as to why we don't see this card being played very often, because a lot of the things that we want to wipe card text for are things that your opponent gets to do on his turn. And if I can't wipe it, or if it doesn't stay wiped, then I don't have any benefit. Next up is something that I mentioned previously as one of my favorite cards of all time in Dice Masters, and I'm really sad that it's rotating out because it's so powerful. This is Prismatic Spray from the original Dungeons & Dragons set, and Prismatic Spray states that when you play this card, or when you use the die, all of your opponent's characters lose all of their card text until the end of the turn. It's an extremely powerful tool, but again, this card can only be used, this die can only be used on your turn. But it does wipe all the card text from your opponent's cards, removes globals. Enemy dice don't have to be active, so you can play this and basically all of their text on all of their cards are gone for good for that turn. So this is a great tool in a lot of ways. So let's pretend that this is your opponent. He's got Ronin, the super rare. He's got an Oracle Master Investigator, and he has Babs all out on the field, all ready to deal with whatever pressure that you've provided. And you have lethal on the board if you could only get through his very formidable, really powerful wall of control cards. So you roll up Prismatic Spray and you land it, and then you use it. And what it does at that point is it wipes all the card text for all of those really powerful control cards that he has, and he's only left with the ability to block with those characters, rather than be able to use those cool abilities to ping out your sidekicks or absorb damage that you want to deal to him. Now again, this card has the drawback of only being able to be played on your turn, so you can't use this as a control card for yourself to wipe card text when your opponent is attacking you. You can only use this as sort of a finisher, quote unquote, to clear the way for your attackers to go through, or prevent some crazy wind blocking ability that might hurt you a lot. That being said, though, the ability to just clear all of your opponent's card text and take away all of the advantages that they may have or may thought they had is really good, and it's sad to see this card go because I love this card and I love being able to just drop it and then not worry about something when I'm pushing a bunch of damage through. Alright, so moving on to the last of the text wiping action cards, we have Captain Cold's Cold Gun from the Green Arrow and Flash set. This is a 3 energy crossover die in that you have to pay a bolt and a fist along with 1 more energy in order to buy this. And the text says, whenever you can use a global ability, you can send this die to the used pile to deal 3 damage to target character die, but the important thing here are the 2 burst symbols, and both burst symbols say, also ignore that character die's text until the end of the turn. An important thing here, it says that this die's card keeps its global abilities. All other copies of the die keep their abilities. So the immediate benefit of this card is that you can use it on your opponent's turn, and it does actually deal some damage. So you could conceivably wipe card text and also KO a character on your opponent's turn, preventing them from doing some big push or attack. And that's what this is often used for. It's a very powerful tool in that sense. Now, the downsides to this card are what we'll look at in a second. One, it doesn't protect you very well from multiple of the same die because it only wipes card text for really ability text for 1 die itself. Plus, it has to actually land on the burst symbol to even do the card text wiping that you might be looking for. So in that sense, it could be a little unpredictable compared to some of the other dice we've looked at so far. So if we go back to the situation that we were just in, with my opponent having all of those control cards out on the field, the dice ready to go, and we take Prismatic Spray and replace it with Captain Cold's Cold Gun, then we're faced with different problems because now we no longer can just push all of our dice in after we wipe all of his card text and let him choose where to block. We actually have to choose what we want to deal damage to and card text wipe, especially if we landed it on an asterisk or a burst face. So it might be good in that sense that we can KO one of his dice beforehand if, depending on the board state, we're presenting a certain amount of damage. Or it might not be good because we can't wipe all of his card text and then not worry about those powerful abilities that he wants to use against us. That being said, Captain Cold's Cold Gun is a great option in the meta currently because most of the decks that are dominating the meta, things that are really powerful right now, are solely contingent upon win attacks abilities. Beholder and Bard can both be nuked by a Captain Cold's Cold Gun and prevented from doing their ability text. So therefore, Captain Cold's Cold Gun is stronger against those. Now, it doesn't deal with Lantern Ring, and there's not a lot that does deal with Lantern Ring. That's another video for another time. But a card that can deal with 2/3 of the powerful decks in the meta is worth putting on an 8-man team. Okay, moving on to some character cards that also wipe card text. These are 2 very powerful cards. One is still in the meta with the rotation on Modern Age, and the other one is actually rotating out. We have the rare Dwarf Wizard and Constantine Hellblazer. Starting with Dwarf Wizard, Paragon Zentarum from the second D&D set, commonly known as D-Wiz in this game. Dwarf Wizard is a super powerful card. Forget about the experience ability. That's not important. What is important is it says, when fielded, target a character die. While Dwarf Wizard is active, copies of that character die in the field zone have no text. If you field another Dwarf Wizard die, target a new die, canceling all previous choices.
This is boring.
Now, I know, that's a lot of card text to try and understand, but what it basically means is that when you place him out there on the field, you get to pick a character die. Now, the die that you pick does have to actually be out on the field at that time, but you pick one, and then while he's active, all the copies of that die, when they come out on the field or when they're on the field, they have no text, right? None of them have text. And then if you want to change that target character die text wipe thingy, you just put another Dwarf Wizard out there. And the only way to remove the card text block on whatever card your opponent has is to remove the Dwarf Wizard that cast that ability, that spell. If you're a visual learner like me, maybe this example will help. So let's set the scene a little bit. You have Dwarf Wizard. You've just placed him out there. There he is. With Dwarf Wizard, you name Half-Elf Bard, and you name him because he's actually out on the field there on your opponent's side. The moment you name Half-Elf Bard, his card text is wiped, and it will not come back until you remove, or your opponent removes, Dwarf Wizard. So the ability itself has a lot of staying power. The card itself is a blocker as well. And you can do some really cool things where you KO him yourself and roll him next turn and name something new and just constantly keep that pressure on where your opponent has to work around this card text wiping thing. All right, finally we've gotten to the last card we're going to talk about today. This is Constantine Hellblazer. He has been a popular staple in the competitive scene since he came out, and he's now finally being rotated out with the rotation of that first Justice League set. Once Modern comes out, he will go by the wayside into Golden Age. His ability states that while Constantine is active before your opponent's clear and draw step, you may name a character. If that character is fielded this turn, ignore its text until the end of the turn, and it cannot attack this turn. His ability is great because it does actually apply to your opponent's turn. You name a character, and if your opponent fields that character this turn, its card text is wiped, and it can attack. So it's a good stopgap for at least a turn. Example time. So let's say, for example, it's turn 3, and you have Constantine, and you are just ending your turn. So your opponent's about to begin his turn, but before they start their clear and draw step, you get to name something with Constantine, and let's just say you name Half-Elf Bard, because why not? What else would you name? And so your opponent decides, hey, I'm going to field him anyway. He fields Half-Elf Bard, and Half-Elf Bard's text is wiped, and its character die cannot attack that turn. Now, unfortunately, all of its card text and its ability to attack comes right back the next turn, but that at least gives you a turn to do something about it. You could try renaming him next turn, but it doesn't actually work that way. If you try renaming him and he doesn't come out onto the field, if he's already out on the field, then his abilities are still there. It has to hit the field that turn rather than already be active. So there you have it, everybody. Those are the card text wiping tools that you can place on your team. Which of these do you think is the best? Which do you like to use the most? Are there any drawbacks that you see to these cards? What are the cards that you worry about using? What do you think? Oh, come on. About 90% of the way through making this video, and I realized I totally left off Slander. So Slander is a basic action card. It's not actually part of your team, so you bring it along with your other basic action. It's a 2 cost, and when you play it, it says target opposing character loses its ability text until the end of the turn. It's also got a nice little global that helps deal damage when your opponent uses something that has a when fielded or when attacks effect. But really, it's all for the blanking of card text. Some of the nice things about it are that because it's a basic action, it doesn't actually take up a slot on your team. Unfortunately, that does mean that your opponent can buy it and use it against you, but that's a small price to pay for being able to bring 8 cards that you want to bring and this on the side. It doesn't wipe globals, and it has to be used on something that's actually out on the field, but it's a great little card if you've already got all 8 cards on your team set in stone and you need something that wipes card text as well. In terms of usage, it's just like Kryptonite or any of those single target removal cards that are in the game. You play the die, you target a character, and it loses its card text. Okay, so now we've talked about all the card text wiping tools in the game so far. Let me know what you guys think about these cards. Tell me which ones you like, which ones you enjoy using. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know, and thanks for watching.